How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Fringy123 here, and today we're going to be talking about next-gen consoles in comparison to PCs on today's episode of Casual Friday. Now, I am excited for next-gen consoles, I really am, and it's great that we are now getting these new consoles that have a graphical improvement. However, I am starting to become a bit more skeptical about how awesome they're going to be. As we've seen at E3 and at other game demos, they've always been running on PCs. Now, this is not uncommon, but it always makes me wonder about the supporting material, if the supporting material is actually representative of the final product. Now, while I'm excited for next-gen consoles, I think that a lot of people are going to be in for a bit of a shock when they realize that the graphical leap is not going to be as large as they think it is. In the sense that the graphical leap is not going to be the same between, say, the PS2 and the PS3, or the Xbox and the Xbox 360. Because the ecosystem has changed. There have been new platforms that have come out, like tablets, that are much more appealing to the average consumer. And as a result, it's kind of limited how far they are able to push the technology. Now, the reason why I want to talk about my skepticism about the hardware, it has to do with some recent news that's come from Gamescom. So, Scott Lowen, editor at IGN, said that he had hands-on time with Battlefield 4 on a PlayStation 4 dev kit, and according to him, it was not up to par. According to him, it was not up to par for what he was expecting from a next-gen game. Now, what he said was, it was not only running at sub 1080p, which is what we expected from next-gen, as most of our current-gen games ran at 720p. We expected that jump. He said that, texture-wise, it didn't look that great. So while it was running at 60 frames per second, the textures, all the polygons, he said he was not impressed by. This makes me worried, because there are a couple of things that have to do with the design of the next-gen consoles that kind of worry me regarding this. Now, we can definitely see that there has been a change in the quality of early Xbox games and early PlayStation 3 games to what we have now. For example, if we were to examine a game like Perfect Dark Zero, which was a launch title for the 360, to a game like Halo 4, there is definitely a noticeable graphical improvement to that game. There is no denying. Those games look very different. But we need to remember a couple of things. For one, when those consoles launched, they were very, very competitive to gaming PCs, and in a lot of respects they were actually better than a lot of the parts and components that you could get for PCs at the time. Let's take a look at the 360. So, when 360 launched, it actually was more powerful than the best gaming PCs you could get. Some of the components in there were 6 to 12 months ahead of gaming PCs, so it had longevity, just like what I said I would have with my computer. Now, another thing we need to remember is that those consoles had very unique architecture. The Xbox 360 less so, but let's take a look at the PS3 with the cell processor. There was nothing like it. So, in order to tap into that power, because they invested so much money in the cell processor, developers had to keep time making games for cell, and as a result, it took a long time before we saw the full potential of the cell processor, and it's still being pushed till today. The next-gen consoles are less like this. For example, the next-gen consoles are both using x86 architecture, so it is very similar to a PC. It's essentially just a PC, but at a subsidized cost, because most consoles are sold at a loss. So, essentially, we have these consoles that are running on unique architecture, and another thing that's important is that these consoles are not better than the highest-end gaming PCs. The technology in the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One is not ahead of a lot of gaming PCs. My rig cost about $1,000 to build, and this is in Australia, where it's more expensive. Now, these consoles are low to mid-range computers, low to mid-range gaming PCs. So they do not have the graphical fidelity that a lot of people were probably expecting. Not as nearly as much as the leap between the 6th generation and the 7th generation, or generations prior. So we have these consoles that are essentially running with a similar architecture to PCs and a low to mid-range PCs. And as a result of this familiar architecture, the developers will be able to churn as much power out of it as they can right now with PCs. Now, they will optimize for these certain parts, but unlike the other processors where they had to figure it out, these are simple, so really they can tap into most all of the power immediately. Now, if Battlefield 4 is not running at 1080p, and it's not running at its highest settings, but it's running at 60 frames per second on the next-gen consoles, what longevity will they have? And this is a serious question I pose. If there's stuff already getting cut out of the games, what else will they need to cut out of the game? This is important because essentially we need to discuss the longevity of the consoles. If they're already cutting things out, that means that the consoles are not up to par with gaming PCs, unlike the previous generations. So for $1,000 like I did, you can build a PC which is more powerful than their next gen consoles, and then have the benefits of it actually being a PC with cheaper games and being able to use it for, you know, computer processes and doing work. So really, why should I be compelled to buy a next gen console when it's not really all that next gen? Yeah, there's some more cell shaders and, you know, particle effects, woohoo, but really the graphical leap is not that great. Now, from a business standpoint, I can understand why. I mean, they can't, if it's too expensive, then people just get pissed off, but then they want that leap, so they've got to find that middle ground. And the landscape has changed since then, with tablets becoming very popular for casuals. So I really urge you to wait until the consoles come out to find out about their true graphical power, because what we've seen is heavily staged, and sure, it may be an alpha, but really that might actually look better than the real thing. And you need to keep that in mind when you're making your purchase. And with that, that ends today's episode of Casual Friday. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, if you did, make sure to give a thumbs up. It helps out a lot. And subscribe to see more Casual Friday, Versus, and numerous other shows that I run. As usual, I'm Fringy123, and have a good one.